Bafetu, we are at the BFAP Baseline 2026. Welcome to another I'm a Farmer. Everybody knows that South Africa is currently facing quite a bit of a challenge when it comes to animal health. And I'm talking about foot and mouth disease. However, a lot has been done on the ground to make sure that the agricultural sector and the livestock sector gets back to normal. Basically, trading and all the other stuff was affected, but things are being done on the ground. But I am not the analyst today. I've got two of them here, and they're going to tell us who they are and what they do. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks so much for having us. I think just to introduce myself, my name's Desmond, and I'm an analyst at the Bureau for Food and Agriculture Policy. My focus is on the livestock sector, and I do a lot of my work here with my colleague Gerhard on the right.
Yeah, good morning, Tawi. Good to be here. My name is Gerhard van der Burg, also an analyst, also a farmer actually, so know quite a bit about the livestock sector and the realities for the entire value chain. So thank you for having us on the show.
It's actually wonderful that you farm, Gerhard, because then not only do you see things on the numbers, but you also see them on the ground. Is this correct?
100% correct. That's the hard realities.
So let's get into it, gentlemen. I'm going to throw this question, either one of you can answer. We are facing quite a bit of a challenge in the animal sector, foot and mouth disease particularly. So I want to ask, what has the challenges been for the farmers on the ground in terms of their livelihoods and the fact that they can't farm the same way as they did before? So what are some of the challenges the farmers are facing?
I could maybe take that one first. I think it's not past tense. In other words, it's not over. We're still in the thick of it, the entire sector. And I think with that, you mentioned the new normal. The reality is we are in a new normal. So the sector has changed. Everything from whether it's goat, sheep, cattle, beef cattle, dairy cattle, it has changed. And the realities at ground level goes beyond just the farm. And if I say it goes beyond that, it has ramifications with regards to market and market access. All of a sudden, you are cash flow constrained, and whether you're a medium-sized farmer, a large farmer, or even a farmer owning 2 heads of cattle, you were affected and still being affected. And I would say the impact, Tabi, unfortunately, is the list is very, very long. Whether it is, miscarriages or abortions, whether it's fever, which means your cattle are not growing, whether it's, the death of small calves. In the dairy sector, major losses in milk production, and even deaths again, culling of herds. So the list is really endless. And I think the reality is that it's still currently, as we speak today, testing the resilience of farmers. And again, irrespective of the size of production, it's still having an impact. Desmond,
it's having an impact on the farmers. But what is it doing to the markets and our ability to trade?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, as Gerhard mentions, as much as it's an animal disease, there's a term used referring to foot and mouth disease as a trade disease. So it has massive implications on the supply chain. So we talk about supply chain continuity, being able to source weaners for the feedlot sector, to be able to source slaughter-ready animals. Foot and mouth disease has severe constraints on the supply chain, and part of that being, or a lot of that being, because it is a notifiable disease and controlled by the state. So it's up to the state to maintain control of the disease, and because of that, when there are outbreaks, severe movement restrictions are placed onto producers, onto the feedlots, onto basically the whole value chain. So part of the other impacts that are happening to farmers is when they get that outbreak of FMD and when it gets picked up by the vets and they get put on those movement restrictions, they are being forced to keep animals on the land that otherwise would be sold into the market. That has implications on the veld, degradation of the veld. Animals don't put on as much weight as they would be, not enough feed available, and then they have to, general disease control measures, getting the routine vaccinations in throughout the normal production cycle. Looking at the feedlot sector, I mean, they have a few options. They previously had to, I mean, keep the animals for an extended period of time, where they looked at changing the feed rations, what they'd give the animals, maybe put them on a maintenance ration. But at the end of the day, the animal's in the feedlot for longer. It gains more weight than it should. You're spending more on feed, and then you get deducted for that or penalized for that at the end, at the abattoir level.
Gerhard, I just want to get back to the whole farmers situation. One thing I picked up with some of my friends who are in farming, they say that some of their neighbors were not ready for this, which means that things like, biosecurity wasn't taken seriously by some farmers, or most farmers didn't even know what biosecurity measures they need to put on their farms. So what did this do in terms of readiness? What did this teach the farmers?
Yeah, Tavi, I think the reality is that this is not unique to South Africa. It's not unique to our farming system. In general, and general is unfortunately a generalization, that is the problem, is that, normal classic farming, you weren't 30 years ago, 50 years ago, faced with the, call it biosecurity world that we are living in today. So due to that in the history, I think a lot of farmers were kind of naive. It won't happen to me. And with saying that, once it hit, everybody looked around and tried to figure out what to do, and the information and the correct information was reactive. It's a reactive process. So I think key to what we not have learned, but busy learning, and already there's certain things I think burned into our brain, is that it can't happen again. It can't happen again that we are caught off guard as a country and as a livestock sector. So in saying that, I think the benefit, or if you can call it a benefit, but the reality check of FMD is that every single farmer, whether again you have 2 heads of animal or even 1 or 200 or 2,000, needs to take ownership of what they have. And if you're not doing it, your neighbor should be able to reprimand, help you, support you, so that as a collective, one can get the change going. And I think in saying that, Desmond mentioned FMD is I think, one of the best known trade or economic diseases, but there are zoonotic diseases that are far worse than FMD. That if they were, to run like a veldfire, it would be much worse for the country, and especially on the food security side. And I think one such a disease is brucellosis, as an example. So, I mean, the effect of a contaminated animal or infected animal on brucellosis versus FMD is actually, as a farmer, I think much worse. And I think the positive side of the outbreak is seeing this crack in the hull of the ship. In other words, it's vast, it's clear, there is a definite crack, and the crack is veterinary services. Unless that gets addressed, and unless there's a public-private working relationship, not just on paper, but working relationship, where each and every farmer knows what they need to do in this value chain, supported by state type of vets or animal health technicians, knowing who needs to take the accountability and responsibility for certain things, we actually, I think, will get a positive outcome out of this. And why I started with, it's not unique to South Africa. A country like Argentina, as an example, I mean, they are one of the top exporters of beef. They have really good cattlemen, stockmen, and if you just take that country and how long it took them to get out of a crisis, it was at least 3 years before they were kind of back on track. So I think we should also realize it's now been, say, just over a year from call it the biggest outbreak and almost the uncontrolled outbreak. And with that, the speed at which vaccinations came in, yes, the speed of administration is still lacking, but there is progress. So I think we should kind of see the glass hopefully more full than empty. But again, as we spoke about it, the impact's felt at farm level, at producer level. It's going to hurt us for a couple of more months and maybe years to come. But it should be a wake-up call as to this is not the government's problem on their own. This is not a producer's problem. This is a country problem.
Speaking of the government, Desmond, I was in the Northwest a couple of months ago at an auction. And one of the people there told me that the auction house is working together with the government to vaccinate cattle for the local people because they saw that, one, there's a lack of resources there to do that. Two, the actual farmers themselves didn't even know that some of their animals were sick. So, coming to you, Desmond, I want to know something. What is the government doing on the ground, and does it have an effect? Look, obviously, I can't say it's going to happen now. Like you said, it's going to take time. But is it really working?
Yeah, I think touch on the fact that there's not a one-shoe-fits-all issue. There needs to be specific measures put in place in different production zones. I mean, one of the big things we need to develop a better understanding of is the institutional environment surrounding disease control in general and foot and mouth disease control. There are social norms, cultural norms that, yes, okay, you may have laws in place that prevent FMD from spreading and preventing animals from being infected, but when it becomes a necessity to move animals out of the need to, for example, pay for school fees, it becomes difficult to influence or control human behavior. So it's a very nuanced issue, and every environment, like I said, needs a nuanced solution. Turning to, the government and their implementation of the FMD vaccine rollout, it is, like Gerhard says, very encouraging that we're getting these vaccines in. I mean, they're sourcing them from multiple different partners in multiple different countries. But again, getting the distribution right, getting the animals vaccinated, and then on top of that, ensuring that traceability is kept up to pace. Because if you vaccinate one animal and you don't know if you vaccinated it or not, you could end up with a situation where multiple animals are getting vaccinated many times in a row and some aren't. And that just allows the virus itself to circulate in the population. One of the big reasons we previously didn't have an FMD issue in the country was the rinderpest, which wiped out massive populations of buffalo and cattle throughout the region. Unfortunately, the virus was maintained in the buffalo populations and then went down from Zimbabwe into the Kruger National Park. And for a long time, it was controlled really well at the FMD inspection zones, at the protection with vaccination zones, where there was capacity to ensure animal movement was policed or monitored correctly. When there were outbreaks, there was enough vaccine supplied domestically to vaccinate the animals, to use different arms of the state to support in controlling movements. For example, SAPS was a big lever to help reduce the FMD outbreak back in 2014 and the outbreak we had in the earlier 2000s, where they detected the outbreak. They mobilized the South African police services to support monitoring where animals are coming from, where they're going to. So I think now that the disease has reached further into the country, it is a significantly bigger challenge than it was before to control it from a sort of national perspective. But at the end of the day, I think there are positive movements in that direction. It's just a matter of understanding exactly what needs to be done where, because it's not one shoe fits all.
Gerhard, when we get things back on track, how quickly can we see the economic impact?
Darby, so first and foremost, we need to get the market pull back. So the South African consumer is capped with regards to what they can spend on meat. And unfortunately, that means we need to get exports moving. And by getting exports moving again, that will create a pull factor. So we modeled in the latest baseline, if we were to speed up the pace at which we export, we can increase the A2 price by at least R2 on the carcass over the next 24 months. But that would take a huge concerted effort again by government that needs to support export certificate protocols, tie it back to all the vaccination protocols, and that's why I mentioned it is this working relationship that needs to be the focus, a working relationship between government and private sector.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for this. I could talk about this the whole day, but unfortunately, you guys have a job to do to give people the real numbers out there. Thanks for coming through, gents.
Thank you, Tali.
Thanks so much.
For more information, go to BFAP's website. It's here on the screen. There's a lot of information there. Please, please, please do yourself a favor and do more research, especially if you are a farmer. Once again, thank you and see you on the next one.